Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Blaise XPerience for episode 71 today. You are joining us for a special podcast. This podcast is going to be my favorite podcast from the first year. So basically, I'm working on everything for the 1-year anniversary, which is going to be March 16th. And I wanted something that kind of led into that episode nicely, because that episode is basically going to be a giant celebration. We're going to have a lot of different guests on that have been on the podcast throughout the year. And I wanted this to be a podcast that kind of led into that nicely. And it kind of goes over some of my favorite podcasts from the year. So these are, my picks. I ended up picking 12 podcasts out of 70 episodes besides this one. So 12 out of 70 that were just, kind of my favorite for whatever reason. And honestly, I'm really happy with most of those 70 podcasts. Some of the earlier ones, I think, I definitely have grown since then, and I definitely could have been better with those early ones. But, that's kind of how it always is for a podcaster starting out. I mean, your first couple of podcasts are usually your worst podcasts because you're just getting used to things. So I think, once I hit around episode 15 or so, that's when I started to really, get a sense of who I was as a podcaster and kind of really got the hang of things a little bit more. I think the first 15 episodes I did were kind of shaky. And then, beyond episode 15, I think I kind of picked it up a little bit. Because if you remember, episode 17 was actually when I first got an intro song. So it wasn't even until episode 17 that I had an intro song. But I do actually have a lot of news to share with you before we get into my favorite podcast picks. So basically on the March 16th anniversary special, the news that I'm about to mention right here, I'm going to get into this news more in detail in the episode. But I figured it would be good to give you all a sense of where my head is at and where the plans are kind of headed in this episode. That way you know a week ahead of time, okay, in a week, this is what the changes are going to be. So this will kind of give you an idea of what I'm thinking for a week from now. And basically, a week from now, when you hear the March 16th anniversary special, that's when you'll hear more details on the stuff I'm about to mention here. But as I kind of mentioned, the next podcast we do is going to be next Saturday, March 16th. It will be a large, huge mammoth podcast celebrating the anniversary of the podcast. So when I say a mammoth podcast, I really mean it. This is probably going to be a bare minimum of 4-hour podcast. So just kind of prepare yourself for that. And that's why I thought I might not be able to do an episode this weekend, but I managed to get enough time to actually do this. So I'm glad I did. But that episode next week will be 4 hours minimum, I would say. And it could even reach, 5 hours. We'll see how it goes. But the reason for that is because I have so many guests on that have been on the podcast throughout the year. And I thought it'd be really nice to celebrate it with each of them. So there's a lot of different segments, and I think you'll really enjoy those segments. And on top of that, like I said, we're going to go over all the changes in the intro of the podcast. So there's going to be a lot of news at the top of the podcast detailing the changes, and then we'll get into a lot of celebration segments. So it's going to be really fun, and I hope you're going to enjoy that episode. And also, the next stream I do is either going to be Saturday night or early next week. And this will be a goodbye stream on Twitch, which, yes, you did hear me right. That does mean I will be saying goodbye to Twitch, and I will be going to Mixer full-time. By full-time, I don't mean I'm going to stream, 40 hours a week. By full-time, I just simply mean that Mixer will be my platform of choice. So I am thinking about streaming, a couple of days a week. I'm going to get into the exact schedule in the March 16th episode, but it's going to be a couple days a week. I'm going to have a set schedule going forward. So starting with March 16th, I will announce what the schedule is going to be. And then we will keep going forward after that with a regular schedule. So we will have a regular streaming schedule, which is going to be awesome. I'm really excited to bring that to you all. And March 16th itself, we're actually going to have a 12-hour anniversary stream to celebrate. So basically, March 16th, from 10 a.m. Eastern to 10 p.m. Eastern, I will be streaming on Mixer. And this will be kind of our, big return to Mixer. I have done a couple of smaller streams on Mixer before this, but this will be our big return to Mixer. And from then on forward, we'll be going forward with Mixer. And on the goodbye stream on Twitch, I will talk a little bit more about my reasons for going to Mixer instead of Twitch. But I just think Mixer is going to be a better platform for the brand to grow. And I think it really fits in line with the podcast and what we're doing a lot better than Twitch does. So, anyone out there that's a huge Twitch fan, I definitely respect that. Twitch is a great platform. Just, I think for me personally, Mixer is going to be a better platform for me. So I hope everyone is going to understand that, and I hope everyone listening will, come out to Mixer and support on Mixer. And, if someone out there was only watching me on Twitch and you don't want to watch me on Mixer, I completely understand that, and I don't take any disrespect at all. So, don't think I'm going to, be upset at you if you don't want to watch on Mixer because you're only a Twitch fan. And if that's the case, then I respect that, and I'll just be moving forward on Mixer, and I hope to see you there. But if not, then I understand your, perspective. But we can definitely have a discussion about that on the Goodbye Twitch stream if you'd like to. If you want to contact me on Discord to discuss this or anywhere else, I'd be happy to discuss it with you and, kind of get your perspective and talk about mine as well. But the 12-hour anniversary stream that's going to happen on March 16th, basically the schedule for that is going to be detailing 5 games that have been on the podcast multiple times. So to kind of celebrate, we're going to take 5 games that were featured on the podcast a lot and feature those games on a stream. So we're going to start out with Sea of Thieves because that's where I started the podcast. So from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. will be Sea of Thieves. And this is all Eastern time, by the way, on March 16th, Saturday. From 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. will be Dead by Daylight. From 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. will be Vigor. From 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. will be the Darwin Project. And then to finish off, of course you guessed it, we will be doing State of Decay 2 from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. I wanted to start with Sea of Thieves, that's where I started, and I wanted to finish with State of Decay 2 because that's, been the staple for the podcast and where we're still going forward. So, and then I kind of sprinkled in some games that are definitely been a big part of the podcast for. Dead by Daylight, we're still doing a series on monthly. The Darwin Project, I did 2 episodes on, and I still play that game today. I'm still into that game. And Vigor, we've done 3 podcasts on. I don't play that game regularly anymore, but I think it's been a big enough part of the podcast that I think it should be featured on these streams. So I heard there's going to be an update coming for that game, so we can kind of check out that update on the stream. But once again, real quick, the schedule is 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Sea of Thieves, 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. Dead by Daylight, 3 to 5 Vigor, 5 to 7 The Darwin Project, and 7 to 10 State of Decay 2. The only thing that might change with that schedule is I may end up switching Vigor and Darwin Project, so I might just flip those around in the order, but State of Decay, Sea of Thieves, and Dead by Daylight, that is all locked in, and you can count on that. Darwin Project and Vigor, I might just switch the order of, depending on some guests I'm trying to get for multiplayer for that, basically. Because I'm trying to get some multiplayer going for either Darwin Project or Vigor, and depending on what people's availability is, I might switch it around slightly. But that's most of the news, so, we're going to have an official streaming schedule coming up. We're going to be streaming on Mixer. We're going to have that 12-hour anniversary stream, which I hope everyone, shows up to support. We'll have that mammoth, 4+ hour podcast on Saturday the 16th. And then the other big note I want to mention is that starting on March 16th, there will be a way to support the podcast via Patreon if you wish to do so. And basically Patreon, this is a platform that you can help support creators and what they do. And essentially it's a kind of like a, Twitch subscription or a Mixer subscription or a YouTube sub. Well, I guess not a YouTube sub because you're not paying for that one, but basically it's like paying for a Twitch sub or a Mixer sub essentially. And basically what you're doing is you're giving to the creator to do what they do and create. And in return, you get rewards for those tiers. So I make different tiers. There might be a $1 tier, there might be a $5 a month tier, and etc. And basically I give you rewards for those tiers. So essentially, if you wish to support, then I would really appreciate that. We're going to have a lot more details on this on the March 16th episode, but this is not mandatory in any way, so you don't have to give any money at all. If you can't afford it, if you don't want to give money, that is perfectly fine, and I will completely understand. However you want to support the podcast is fine with me. If you just want to continue downloading the podcast and you don't want to support on Patreon, then I appreciate your support however you can give it. But if you are able to support and you want to do so, then that is great, and I would really appreciate that as well. But I do want to make the distinction that podcasts will always remain free. So, the main podcast will always remain free. Just the Patreon subscribers, they will get extra perks. So we'll get into those perks more on the next episode, on the March 16th anniversary special. But basically, if you're a subscriber on Patreon, you will get extra perks, kind of like if you were a Twitch subscriber, for example, or a Mixer subscriber, you get extra emotes and things. So it's kind of the same things as, those subscriptions, because if you're a Twitch or a Mixer subscriber, then you get extra emotes. If you're a Patreon subscriber to me, then you're going to get extra perks. So we'll talk about those perks on the next episode, but that's basically all it is. So it's not forcing anyone to pay. No one has to be forced to do that. You can still listen free if you'd like to. You're still going to get, streaming content. You're still going to get podcast content. So I don't want anyone to worry about that. The podcast content and streaming content is not going away, and it'll still be coming to you, free of charge, and that won't change. Just Patreon as a way to subscribe and help support me and kind of help fund the podcast going forward. So if you're able to do that, then you'll get some extra perks. If not, you can still listen to the podcast and enjoy it for free. So that's kind of, just describing that a little bit. If anyone has any questions on that, definitely feel free to get a hold of me. I would be happy to discuss it with any of you, but we will talk about the details more in depth on the next episode. But I know that's a lot of news. I just wanted to drop some of the news now because I felt it'd be better to get some of the news done now, and that way you can enjoy that other podcast that's coming next week a little bit more. So, kind of the initial news is broken now. So there's a little bit more news to break. Next week, we will break the official schedule for the streaming. We'll break the Patreon details. And we will also break the podcast schedule going forward. But you pretty much know most of the news now and what's going to happen. So I hope everyone enjoys that and they appreciate that. But I'm going to be hard at work all the way until the 16th, getting everything ready. But without further ado, let's talk about some of my favorite episodes. So basically what I did here is I picked out 12 episodes that were some of my favorite episodes in the first year. And these aren't in any order. I thought about, ranking them, but honestly, this is sort of like ranking your children a little bit. I mean, these are all episodes that I, worked hard on. I produced all these episodes. I had great guests on some of these, and it's way too hard for me to rank these. All I will say is that I've been on record multiple times in saying that episode 26, the top 15 facility mods in State of Decay 2, where I had ML Marasan, that is my favorite episode, and that still stands, so that is my favorite episode of the podcast. But beyond that being my favorite one, the rest of these 12, I couldn't rank at all. I mean, it's way too hard for me. And episode 26, the one I mentioned with Maris, that one is just my favorite because we had such a great back and forth, and we had such a great discussion on the facility mods in the episode that I really appreciated that. We both had completely different viewpoints in some areas, and we both argued our views, but we argued it in a way that was productive, and I really enjoyed that because that was a discussion where we both had differing viewpoints, but we argued two different ways you could actually use the facility mods, and I think it was really helpful for the community in that way because we had different perspectives that the community could use, so the community could kind of see that these mods can be used in different ways. You can use different mods to get the same thing done, but you can arrive at the same goal. So Maris and I arrived at the same goal, just we had different ways of getting there. And I really appreciated that. I thought it was a really open and honest discussion, and it was a really fun episode. So I think, that's still my favorite episode, and it may be for a long time. We'll see. But it's definitely an episode that speaks to me, and there's 11 more that speak to me as well. So we'll kind of get into those. So two that are kind of a no-brainer that speak to me. I did episode 33, an interview with Jeffrey Card, senior designer, Undead Labs, and episode 50, an interview with Jurgen Tadreno, a senior programmer at Undead Labs. These both really speak to me because these are great developers from the studio that I love a lot, and Undead Labs is, I don't even say a lot, honestly. I mean, Undead Labs is my favorite studio, so it's more than a lot, I guess. But basically, both of these gentlemen, they came on the podcast. We did great interviews with them, and I really appreciate that. So, Jurgen, if you're listening, Jeffrey, if you're listening, I really appreciate those interviews. They meant a lot to me, and it was really unique to dive into your background a little bit. For both of these gentlemen, we kind of dove into how they became a member of the Undead Labs team, kind of where they came from before that, how they got into gaming, kind of their process at Undead Labs, a little bit about how they do their jobs. So with Jurgen, we talked about programming a little bit. With Jeffrey, we talked about designing a little bit. And I think these are really interesting discussions. And especially if you're looking to get into game development, I would highly recommend these episodes if you're looking to get into game development. If you're not looking to get into game development, we all obviously love games here. So I think it's really interesting to listen to these discussions. So even if you're not looking to be a game developer, I think these are worth your time because these are really worth listening to and hearing their perspectives. They have some really nice, unique perspectives. So I would definitely recommend these episodes as well. So jumping to a more recent note, though, the most recent one I have on this list is actually episode 66. So just a couple episodes ago, it was about a month ago. And this one was I Will Survive, Tips for Survivors in Dead by Daylight. And this was with my co-host on the Dead by Daylight series, ACC. And I really enjoyed this episode because we gave out a lot of great tips with being a survivor in DBD. But not only that, the dynamic that ACC and I had in the episode, I thought worked really well. We also did an episode that was the intro to Dead by Daylight as well, but I thought especially this Survivor episode, our dynamic was really great, and I really enjoyed the dynamic we had. We had a lot of jokes going on, and we talked about how I'm still not following some of the rules we're suggesting, so even some of the rules we suggested I wasn't following properly, so that was fun. But if you are a fan of Dead by Daylight, or even if you're not a fan, you want to hear more about what the game is and how you survive in the game, then I would definitely suggest checking this episode because this episode is a great episode. It was about 2 hours long, and it was jam-packed with information that's really going to help you in Dead by Daylight. So this episode really spoke to me, and it's the most recent episode that made it to my list, but I felt it deserved to be on here because it's an episode I really enjoyed a lot in recording it, and, how it turned out, I think it turned out really well, too. On that same token, another episode that was fairly recent, episode 61. This was the State of Decay 2 Awards Results Show, and this was a lot of fun. It was so much fun for me to set this up for the community. This is the awards show that I put on for State of Decay, and basically I had the help of Sarkoth and ML Maris in making some of the categories, and they helped me, pick out some things that they thought should be in the categories, so I appreciate that to both of you. They were in the nominations show, which the nomination show didn't make my list, but that's not because it wasn't great. I just thought that the awards results show was a little bit more impactful, and because you're actually reading the results. So it's not just the nominations, it's the results too. So I thought it was a little bit more impactful in that sense, and that's why this one made it onto my list instead. But we had some great guests on there. We had K-Sizzle, we had Archie Games Cast, and then we had Jeffrey back again, along with Brant Fitzgerald from Undead Labs as well. And Brant Fitzgerald, for anyone that doesn't know, he's an artist at Undead Labs. So 3 of the episodes on my list all have, guests that are Undead Labs developers, and that's not by chance. Everyone at Undead Labs is so great at what they do, and it's really unique to hear from them, and I love hearing from them in the podcast. So, the episodes with them on it are definitely hold a special place in my heart because I think it's really important to hear from them, and it means a lot to actually have them come on the podcast and have them support the podcast and the community in this way. So they're so supportive of the community, and I really appreciate that. But on top of that, going through these results was really fun, and some of these results were really surprising too. There's a lot of results that I think people wouldn't have really thought about. And then on top of that, we actually had some very, very close calls too. We had a lot of results that were decided by one vote or, couple votes. And we even had one actual category we had to break a tie on the podcast. I won't say what that was in case you want to go back and listen to it. I won't spoil it, but there was actually one category we had to break a tie on the podcast because it was a dead tie. And then not only that, we had some great awards that gave back to members of the community too. We had Streamer of the Year, we had Rookie of the Year, which was for a, newer streamer or a streamer that didn't make the Streamer of the Year category that we wanted to recognize. We had Community Member of the Year, which is basically someone that, supported everyone in the community throughout 2018. And then we had Content Creator of the Year as well, which is basically a YouTuber, a podcast like this one, or some other form of content that wasn't necessarily a stream. So you can find out the winners of those awards as well and find out who took home the awards for 2018 for those. And that was episode 61. But stepping away from State of Decay a little bit, all of the episodes I picked weren't actually all State of Decay episodes. We had some other ones that were pretty fun too that were on different games. And I did start the podcast with Sea of Thieves. Some of the early episodes of Sea of Thieves, they do hold a place in my heart. Like, for example, episode 7, that was a great one with Monty where we talked about sailing in the game. And that's one that I really hold, close and was really fun for me. But that didn't make my cut, actually. The couple that made my cut, though, however, there's one with Monty, episode 54, Shrouded Spoils DLC in Sea of Thieves. And this episode was a lot of fun. We talked about a crazy adventure we had where we had to fight skeleton ships, we had to fight a kraken, all to get one gem, and it was just a crazy adventure, and I think it really spoke to what the Shroud of Spoils DLC gave us in Sea of Thieves. So this one, Monty's a great guest, and I love having Monty back on the podcast whenever I can. We can't always make the schedules work out, but whenever he's available, it's always amazing to have him back on the podcast, and he's such a great guest, and the dynamic we have together, I really enjoy that dynamic, and I had to have at least, one episode with him on here. I have a couple actually, but this one was one of my favorite ones with Bonnie because I think it really showed our dynamic and it really showed the fun that Sea of Thieves has to offer. So that's a really special episode for me too. Episode 54, that is. But another one with actually a different guest, episode 38, we talked about the Forsaken Shores DLC in Sea of Thieves, and this one was actually with Meter. And Meter is the CEO and founder of Podcast New Hampshire, which I'm part of, and Blaise XPerience podcast is part of. And this is a really cool episode, too. We talked about all the new islands that were in Devil's Roar, and we talked about the Devil's Roar coming in. We talked about the rowboats, the lava, the volcanoes. This was a really fun, jam-packed episode as well, and we talked about another crazy adventure we had. Our adventure was so crazy, and we had a pirate legend, pretty much sitting there laughing at us, I remember. So it was awesome, and it was so much fun, and to talk about that adventure with Meter on the podcast was great. And Meter, again, he's another one of these great guests. All these guests that come on the podcast, for the most part, have been amazing. Meter's a great guest. I really enjoy that dynamic we have, so definitely check out that episode as well. That is episode 38 on the Forsaken Shores. And then also on Sea of Thieves, this is actually the earliest Sea of Thieves episode I have, back in episode 31, and this was breaking down the Sea of Thieves lore book, and this was actually with one of the deckhands for Rare. Basically, Rare is the company that makes Sea of Thieves, and they have deckhands, which are basically like volunteer leaders or moderators in the community, and I had one of the deckhands on to talk about the lore book with me, Kat Truewalker. So Kat Truewalker and I, we both talked about the lore book. That podcast went, over 2 hours. We talked all the way through the lore book, and there's some really great stories in that lore book about Captain Flameheart and Nine Cats Nura and Belle, all the great characters in that. So definitely check out that episode if you want to hear more about the lore behind Sea of Thieves, because the lore in Sea of Thieves is really cool, and I think this lore book really provides a lot of great context for the game. And talking through that with one of the deckhands, Kat Truewalker, she did a great job going over it with me, and she had a great time speculating with me. So some of the stuff we mentioned in there might be a little outdated now because obviously the game has progressed a lot since then. So we might, speculate on some things in that episode that have already come true or things that have already been, proven wrong. But it was a lot of fun to go through, and I think it's still worth your time to check it out, even if some of our speculation's off, because we talked about the stories in that book, and the stories in that book are worth hearing about. So definitely check out the episode as well, episode 31. But popping back to State of Decay for a second, actually, another episode I have on here that was really a great episode, I think, was episode 56, where I recapped Undead Trials 2 with Fall Down Go Boom. And this one was kind of one of my favorite episodes because Undead Trials 2 was so jam-packed with content, and that was the community event that had a lot going on. It was an 8-day event. We had so many different competitions going on, and Fall Down emerges as champion. So with him being the champion, with me being an organizer, and with myself finishing third place, it was a really great dynamic having Fall Down and I on there because Fall Down and I were there from start to finish. Fall Down won, I got third place, and plus I was one of the organizers. So we were there from start to finish, and it really gave a full discussion of what Undead Trials 2 was, all the competitors that did great in it. We talked about some of the failures that Fallout and I had. Fallout only had one failure. I had many, but I'm trying to, climb back from that in future Undead Trials. Hopefully, Undead Trials 4, I can take the crown finally. We'll see. But it was a really fun episode, and we talked about all the different games that were there, all the different modifications. Sarkoth made some great modifications when he was the referee. Maris made some great modifications. K Sizzle made some cool modifications as well. Andy T. Pims. So all these people made great modifications as referees, and they brought a lot of extra fun to it than what was originally intended, because we had an original set of, base mini games to play, and then some of these referees they took them to the next level, and we really, enjoyed that as well. So it was a lot of fun for a lot of the competitors. We had 65 people in that event, and we're hoping to, get more in Undead Trials 4, but this was such a fun discussion, and if you don't know what Undead Trials is, if you don't know what the community events are for State of Decay, this is definitely the podcast you want to listen to, because you're going to hear a lot about all the fun that we had and all the things that Undead Trials can be in the future. So, Undead Trials 2 Recap, episode 56, that's definitely a great one to listen to. And then I actually have 2 more from State of Decay 2 as well, and these are actually the earliest episodes that I have on the list of 12, and these are also the only 2 that I have on here that were solo episodes. So the 2 I'm about to mention, there was no guest. It was just me by myself. But I think these episodes really portrayed what I was going for in the podcast. So these are episode 18, Top 15 Fifth Skill Options in State of Decay 2, and also episode 20, Ranking the Drucker County Bases. So both of these episodes are part of my favorites because when I talked about these, I really, dove deep into analyzing what the topic was, whether it was the Drucker County bases or the 5th skill options in State of Decay. And I really, used an analytical mindset to figure out what I thought were the best ones. And not that I didn't do that in other podcasts, every podcast I do, I try to analyze things in depth and give the best perspective I'm able to help players. Whether I'm talking about cars, which the episode 14 was about cars, whether I'm talking about, the red talent 5th skills, or whether I'm talking about multiplayer tips and Daybreak, whatever the topic is, I always try my best to analyze the topic and kind of really get deep in there and figure out what is best going to help people that are playing the game. And that's kind of what the purpose of the podcast was when I started out, is, having a really analytical mindset and talking about the strategy, mechanics, and games, and trying to help people, do better at these games, because there's people listening that they might want some extra tips on how to play the game. They might want a different perspective. And that's not to say my perspective is the end-all be-all. It definitely isn't. There's other perspectives out there, and I appreciate all of those, but it's just my perspective is one where I'm trying to dive deep into the statistics of the mechanic, or dive deep into the strategy of the game and give people what I think is the best advice and best tactics to play the game that will actually benefit them most. And that's kind of where my mindset's at. So, other people might have other ways of doing things. Like we found out in episode 26 when I talked to Maris. Maris has completely different ways of handling facility mods, and it still works for him. It still gets the job done. There's nothing wrong with that. I have a different way. So that's why that episode is my favorite, because we had 2 completely different ways that work really well. So there's other ways that work well than what I recommend, but I'm just trying to recommend things that will work well for people if they use them that way. But episode 18 and 20, those ones are really some of my favorites, because this is kind of where I came into my own a little more, back in episode 14 where I talked about the cars, back in episode 12 where I talked about the top tips for State of Decay when you're starting out. Those episodes were decent as well, but I think by episode 18 and 20, I really had my feet under me. We had an intro song, I think I was really used to podcasting a little bit more, and I think by these episodes, I was really, had my wings under me, and I was ready to take off and kind of make this a real, thing. And not that it wasn't a real thing before episode 18, I was definitely trying before that, but I think by episode 18, I had really learned a lot, and I had more opportunity to put what I learned to use. So, I would say before episode 18 is, kind of a little bit rougher around the edges, because I didn't really know what I was doing as well yet. And I would say episode 18 is where I kind of turned the curtain, and I kind of came into my own a little more, and I knew a little bit more what I was doing. And then I would say after episode 18, I've continued to grow since then, and hopefully it shows in the podcast. I've grown more confident in the podcast, and I've grown more used to talking about things. I've grown more used to editing and all the things behind the scenes as well. So everything about the podcast I've become more used to and more ready to keep growing. So episode 18 and 20 really speak out to me as some of my favorites, because those were what I think kind of turned the corner for me. Those are the episodes that I think, really pushed me forward, and where I first started to feel like I kind of had a grasp of what podcasting was. So those are really important episodes to me, and I hope you check them out if you haven't checked them out yet. Episode 18 is about the top 15 fifth skill options in State of Decay 2. So that's going to be things like construction, things like plumbing, and different aspects like that. Ranking the Drucker County bases, that's going to be all the bases in that map ranked. So we're going to have the Abandoned Strip Mall, Knight's Family Drive-In, we'll have Mike's Concrete, and all the other bases in that map. So all those bases will be ranked, and you can find out about those there. So I don't know if you're keeping track at home, but I have mentioned 11 out of 12 episodes. So 11 out of my 12 favorite episodes in the first year are mentioned, but we have one left. And this one I saved for last, not because it's my favorite episode, because we already said what my favorite episode was. That's episode 26. But the reason why I say this one for last is because I feel like this is an episode that not a lot of people have heard. At the time, I think it only got about a little over 100 downloads. It wasn't the most downloaded episode ever. And on top of that, I think it's an episode you wouldn't really expect me to call out as one of my favorites either, because it's not a game that I really talk about a ton anymore or play a lot anymore. But this is episode 45, which was titled Huge Update 0.6 for Vigor. And this was with Monty. We talked about an hour and a half to 2 hours on the update 0.6 for Vigor. And the reason why this is one of my favorites is not because Vigor is one of my favorite games. It's actually a little bit the opposite. Basically, before this episode and before update 0.6, I was a big fan of Vigor. I liked Vigor a lot. I really liked where they were going, and I loved the direction of the game. But update 0.6, in my opinion, it ruined the game, and it actually completely changed the game in the wrong direction. So that's why this episode is one of my favorites, because this is the episode. I don't ever really trash things like, some people do. I'm not going to, bash a game just to bash it. But if you're looking to hear me talk negatively about a game, this is the closest episode you're going to get to that, because I talked, fairly negatively about the changes that they made in that. And I think it went really well, actually, because I really enjoyed the way that Monty and I discussed the negatives of this update, but in a productive way. And that's kind of what I love, because it shows what I'm trying to get at with this podcast. I'm not trying to be unproductive with my criticisms or my positive comments either. I'm trying to be productive in what I'm saying. So all the negatives I said about, update 0.6 and Vigor, I think they're all valid in my mind, and I think I provided, reasons and evidence for that. So, I didn't just say, oh, the update 0.6, it sucks because you can't do anything. That's not really a comment that helps anyone. That comment doesn't do anything, because saying you can't do anything, well, what can't you do? What did it change? That helps no one saying a comment like that. So I think the comments that Monty and I made in that episode, it really showcases, a lot of analysis and thought that we went into it, because Monty and I thought a lot about it, and we really provided some reasons why update 0.6 might not have been the best for the game. Maybe the game will do great when it releases it, because it technically hasn't had a full launch yet. It's still technically in its alpha or beta stage, but maybe when it fully launches, free to play, it'll do amazing and it'll take off like crazy. Maybe it will. But in my opinion, update 0.6, the game went in the wrong direction, and I'm still hoping they fix that. And, during my March 16th stream, we're going to check out the newest update that came after this, and we'll see if, they fix things a little bit more. But episode 45 about that update, that was one of my favorite episodes, because it really showcased, in my opinion, constructive criticism in a great way, because Monty and I were both constructive and criticized the game in a way that was productive for the game. So I really enjoyed that episode, and hopefully everyone else did too. And if you haven't listened to it yet, I definitely suggest you go listen to it. But that being said, those are my top 12 favorite episodes of the first year. So real quick, I'll mention them again. Episode 26, Top 15 Facility Mods in State of Decay 2. Episode 33, Interview with Jeffrey Card. Episode 50, Interview with Jurgen Tajerno. Episode 61, State of Decay 2 Awards Results Show. Episode 56, Undead Trials 2 Recap. Episode 54, Shrouded Spoils DLC and Sea of Thieves. Episode 45, Huge Update 0.6 for Vigor. Episode 31, Breaking Down the Sea of Thieves Lorebook. Episode 38, Forsaken Shores DLC and Sea of Thieves. Episode 20, Ranking the Drucker County Bases. Episode 18, Top 15 Fifth Skill Options in State of Decay 2. And our most recent one on the list, Episode 66, I Will Survive, Tips for Survivors in Dead by Daylight. So I know that was probably a mouthful, but those are my 12 favorite episodes for the year. So hopefully everyone enjoyed this. And I know it's a little bit short of an episode, but I definitely promise it'll be made up for next week. So there'll be more than enough, length of episode next week. So stay tuned for that. It's going to be amazing, and I can't wait. Just to remind everyone, that podcast is probably going to be a little over 4 hours, maybe 5 hours, somewhere around that range. And next stream is going to be either Saturday nights, the night you're hearing this, or potentially early next week. That will be our final stream on Twitch. So I have officially decided to go to Mixer full time, and on that Twitch stream, I will explain some of my reasons a little bit more. So if you want to talk to me before that, you can definitely do so, but I will be explaining my reasons more on that Twitch stream. And then after March 16th, we will have an official streaming schedule. So on that March 16th podcast, I will talk about that more in depth, which also we will be opening a Patreon on March 16th. So that will be a way for you to subscribe to the podcast and the brand and streaming the podcast, all that put together, and the way for you to support all the content I'm creating. And this is not something you have to do, but it's an option for you to get more rewards if you want to do that. So I will talk about that a lot more in depth on the March 16th podcast. And then I also want to mention again, too, I'm going to have a 12-hour anniversary stream on March 16th. This will be from 10 a.m. Eastern to 10 p.m. Eastern. We'll be playing from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Sea of Thieves, 1 p.m. to 3, Dead by Daylight, 3 to 5, Vigor, 5 to 7, The Darwin Project, and 7 to 10, we will be ending with State of Decay 2. So those are all going to be featured on there because they were all games that were featured on the podcast and that games that I still enjoy or were a big part of the podcast. But that being said, I hope you all enjoy this episode, and I hope to see you all on March 16th on the 12-hour stream. That will be on mixer.com/Blaise XPerience. So once again, if you want to check out that stream, that'll be mixer.com/Blaise XPerience, which is also my gamer tag in Twitter, @Blaise XPerience, so capital BLAISE, capital XPerience. If you want to contact me via email, you can do so, theblaisexperience@gmail.com. My Discord link will be in the show notes. You can also find us on YouTube, which will be in the show notes. And if you want to find the podcast, you're already listening to it, obviously, but if you want to find it a different way than you already are, then you can find a direct download link in my Discord. You can find it on YouTube. You can find it on Spotify, on Stitcher, on Google Podcasts, on iTunes, on Podbean, Blueberry, Radio Public, pretty much any directory you can think of, you can find the podcast. So even if you just type into Google the Blaise XPerience, it'll pop up for you. You'll be able to find it. So literally, if you just Google the phrase the Blaise XPerience, you will find the podcast. But I really hope everyone downloads March 16th episode. That's going to be a great episode. So even if it takes you a while to listen to it, I totally understand. It's going to be a long episode. But I really hope everyone downloads that because that's an episode I put a lot of work into, and it took a lot of time to make that episode. So I hope everyone's going to enjoy it, and I hope everyone enjoyed this episode too. But any feedback is welcome, whether you want to send it on Discord or Twitter, which I'm most active on, or whether you want to send it in a different platform. And I hope to also see you all on the mixer.com/Blaise XPerience stream. That will be, once again, March 16th, Saturday, 10 a.m. Eastern to 10 p.m. Eastern. So I hope to see you all there. And thanks again for listening to the Blaise XPerience.